When you think about history, are there lots of old guys wearing wigs and stockings? When you think about history, is Napoleon really short? And folks have wooden teeth. Do you know that history can be the most incredible, amazing stories for you and me? Sit back and listen to a story right now. It's honest, it's fun, and it's sure to.
Hi, young historians. Welcome to another episode of Anytime Now. I'm Brooke, co-founder of Honest History. Are you as excited about this episode as I am? I sure hope so. We're about to dive into another story-filled adventure and learn something new. And remember, by learning more about the past, you can make a positive impact on the future. So pack your bags and let's go.
Do you know all the names of the plants that grow near your home? To a lot of people, a flower is just a flower. But to Ynés Mexía, every leaf and petal told a story. Even as a child, Ynés was happiest outside, studying the leaves in her garden rather than sitting indoors. But for a long time, she felt out of place and struggled to find where she belonged. Until, at age 51, when she finally discovered her true calling, botany. This is the study of plants. From that moment on, her life would be filled with adventure. From a shy girl in Texas to one of the most accomplished botanists in history, Ynés's journey shows us that it is never too late to follow your passion. This is the story of Ynés Mexía, the late-blooming botanist. The year was 1878. 8-year-old Ynés could hear her mom and sister talking excitedly in the sitting room. They were planning another party at their home. Ynés sighed. She did not like parties. She sat on the porch of their house, looking at the flowers blooming in the garden. She heard a bird chirping in a nearby tree and stood up to look at it. The hot Texas sun hit the top of her head as she marched out into the garden. Ynés spent a lot of time alone as a child. Her father, who worked for the Mexican government, was often away on business trips. When her mother and sister were busy entertaining family and friends, Ynés would escape to the outdoors. She loved reading or walking outside. Most of all, she loved looking at all the animals and plants that lived near her home. But just a year later, Ynés had to say goodbye to her home in Texas. Her parents separated, and she moved with her mother and sister to Pennsylvania. Soon after, her mother sent her to a boarding school in Canada, where she struggled to make friends. Shy and quiet, Ynés spent most of her days alone, filling her time with reading and writing. She wrote long letters about all the things she saw near her school in Canada. It was a very lonely time for Ynés, and she longed to see her family. When she was 17 years old, she finished school and received a letter in the mail. It was from her father.
Ynés,
The letter said,
you will come and live with me in Mexico City.
Ynés was excited. It had been years since she had seen her father, but she was also nervous. Even though her father was from Mexico, she had never been there before. She anxiously packed her bags and boarded a train to begin her new life. When she finally reached the Mexico City station many days later, a man from her father's ranch was waiting. He led her to a horse and carriage, and together they set off for the ranch located just outside the city. As Ynés walked through the front door, she gasped in delight at her father's beautiful home. Her shoes clacked on the red tile floor as she walked from room to room. She wondered if it would ever feel like home. Soon after she settled in, her father appeared to tell her the news.
I will often be away.
He said coldly.
You will look after the ranch while I'm gone.
Ynés didn't know what to say. He wanted her to look after his house. She would have to manage the cooks, gardeners, maids, and workers. She would be in charge of the entire ranch. Ynés did not understand why her father asked her to manage his home. She had never done anything like it before, but she rose to the challenge. While he was away, she made sure everything ran smoothly. And, just like before, Ynés saw very little of her father, and life on the ranch could be very lonely. On one of her father's trips, he became very ill. Ynés wrote to her half-sister, Amy, who was with her father in Mexico City. She asked Amy for any news. "How is Papa?" she asked. "Papa is worse," Amy wrote back. Within a month, her father had passed away, and Ynés and her sister Adele were told that they would inherit all of his land, including his ranch in Mexico. Although Ynés now had wealth and land, her life for the next few years would be very difficult. She married and found herself deeply unhappy. There were many days when she could not get out of bed. When she was 39, she realized she needed to make a change. So, she decided to pack her bags and travel to San Francisco, California. San Francisco was an interesting place to be at that time. Just a few years earlier, a huge earthquake had destroyed most of the city. When Ynés arrived, new buildings were being built on every street. The city and its people were starting over, and in many ways, that's what Ynés felt she needed to do. She needed a fresh start. Ynés soon met a doctor in the city named Dr. Brown. She hoped he could help her feel better. Over time, Dr. Brown became more than just her doctor. He became a friend, perhaps Ynés's first true friend. He encouraged her to get out walking and try new hobbies.
Maybe you should take some classes,
he suggested. Ynés had always loved the outdoors, so she decided to take up photography, bringing her camera everywhere she went. She also continued to write. Feeling happier and more confident than ever, she decided to join a group called the Sierra Club. This organization was made up of people who shared her love. She went on club outings where she hiked up into the mountains and learned all about the local plants and animals. She also made many new friends. Then, Ynés made a courageous decision. She decided she wanted to go back to school. At the age of 51, Ynés enrolled at the University of Berkeley in California. And it was here that she discovered her calling, botany. As a little girl, she had always loved looking at the plants near her home in Texas. And at Berkeley, she realized she could turn this love into a career. She could travel the world, studying plants and finding species no one had ever seen before. Her first expedition would be in Mexico.
Hi friends, are you enjoying today's episode? I'd like to take a quick break from the story to tell you about another great place to learn about the past. Honest History creates magazines and books for kids that are filled with fun stories and activities that bring history to life. From pirates to spies to great inventions and so much more, you'll learn about interesting people, places, and events from around the world that made history. Created for kids ages 6 through 12, you can sign up and receive new adventures delivered straight to your doorstep every quarter. Just visit honesthistory.co. That's honesthistory.co to sign up today. Oh, and here's a special offer for our podcast listeners. Use code ANYTIMENOW for 10% off. Again, that special code is ANYTIMENOW. Okay, let's get back to the story.
In 1925, she returned to the country she had left all those years ago, a changed person. She had found her place. "I have a job where I produce something real and lasting," she said. Over the next few years, Ynés would travel across North and South America, collecting different plant specimens and writing about her adventures. And then she was given an incredible opportunity to travel to the Amazon. She couldn't think of a more exciting place to go. The Amazon's dense rainforest would be filled with plants and animals she had never seen. There were parts of the river that few had ever explored. Well, why not? Ynés said as she packed her bag. At 61 years old, she was not afraid of adventure. She was very different from the young girl she had been back in Texas. In August 1931, Ynés loaded her equipment onto a boat at the Amazon River. The boat, called the Victoria, was much fancier than she was used to. It was fitted with electric fans and screens to keep the bugs away. Normally, she'd be riding her horse and sleeping under the stars rather than traveling on a big steamship. Surely there was no roughing it on this steamer, Ynés thought as she began unpacking her bag. Ynés looked out as the ship chugged down the river. Black caimans lounged on the sandy riverbank. Sometimes they'd slip into the water and swim towards the ship, with their long, tooth-filled snouts sticking up above the surface. Flocks of green and silver parakeets flew above them, chattering loudly as they passed. People in canoes rowed by, selling fruits and shells. And sometimes a pink dolphin leapt out of the river and playfully dived back into the water. Whenever the boat stopped, Ynés would pull on her boots and walk to the plank so she could get a closer look at the world around her. And every direction she turned, she saw green. Trees, vines, and leaves stretched out across the horizon. The Amazon rainforest. This is what interested Ynés the most. She wondered what new and wonderful plants were hiding deep in the forest. But when she got off the boat and crossed into the trees, it was not what she expected. There are no trails, it is dark, she remembered. The trees were so dense, no sunlight could get through. Ynés breathed in the moist air. There was a heavy smell of damp and rotting logs. She couldn't see any flowers on the forest floor. But if she looked up, that is where all the life was. High in the treetops, animals and plants made the rainforest their home. After 24 days sailing down the Amazon, Ynés said goodbye to the Victoria. She would be making the rest of her journey in a canoe, but Ynés wouldn't be alone. She would be joined by her trusty guide, Jose, and several indigenous guides who knew the river better than anyone. Now she was really roughing it, and Ynés loved every minute of it. The men rowed the canoes down the river, staying close to the shore so that they could enjoy the shade of the overhanging trees. There's one thing you can count on in the rainforest, and that's rain. Every afternoon, dark clouds gathered above them. Thunder boomed and lightning streaked across the sky. Then, rain poured into the river, filling their canoes. The rain was so heavy, they could barely see where they were going. But only moments later, the clouds would clear and the rain would be gone. In the evenings, they'd find a spot on the sandy bank to set up camp. Ynés relied on her skilled guides to make sure she was safe. In this part of the world, they had to be very careful. They could be tracked by a jaguar. Ynés and the men spread leaves out on the ground to make a rug and set up their beds. They made sure to hang their mosquito nets so that they could get some much-needed sleep. In the early morning, they hopped in their canoes and continued their journey. All along the way, Ynés met many of the indigenous people who called the Amazon home. She gave them small gifts. To the women, she often gave needles, and to the men, fish hooks. Sometimes they welcomed her into their homes. She was also taking every chance she had to collect new plants she found. As winter arrived, the rainstorms grew heavier and the river began to flood. Ynés and her guides stared out at the violent river. They couldn't go any further in their canoes. It was too dangerous. But Ynés had an idea. What if they tied some logs together and made a raft? A raft, she thought, would do much better in the rain than a canoe. She got the help of the local indigenous people, and together they constructed a large raft made of balsa wood. They loaded her equipment and plant specimens into the raft. Then, Ynés and her guides boarded their makeshift boat. This time, they brought a new friend with them, a small baby monkey. They untied a vine holding the raft to the bank, and off they went. The river roared as it swept them into its powerful current. Ynés's guides held two giant oars on either side of their boat, trying to keep them on course. But up ahead, they spotted their first danger, a whirlpool. The water swirled around dangerously in front of them. Ynés clutched the raft as the current spun them around again and again and again. Finally, the whirlpool spat them out. They all breathed a sigh of relief. Once they passed the most dangerous part of the river, Ynés and her guides could finally relax. They built a thatch roof over part of the raft and a fireplace at the back. To Ynés, it was a wonderful place to spend her days. She wrote her notes and watched the birds as the raft floated peacefully down the river. Much to her annoyance, their new friend, the baby monkey, demanded constant attention. But she couldn't be that angry. It was so tiny and amusing that one could not help loving the little thing, Ynés said. Ynés spent 2 happy weeks aboard the raft. In January, it was finally time to go home. She made the long journey back up the river and all the way to California, traveling by hydroplane, airplane, train, mule, and automobile. Her trip to the Amazon was an adventure she would never forget. She had traveled 3,000 miles up the river, seeing places, animals, and plants few had ever seen before. When she returned to California, she had collected thousands of plant specimens, and all of this at 61 years old. Ynés would continue working for 7 more years. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 68 from cancer, just 1 month after returning from her last expedition. In just 13 years, Ynés had achieved far more than most botanists accomplish in a lifetime. She had traveled alone across North and South America, collecting over 145,000 specimens. Dozens of plants have since been named after Ynés in her honor. "I don't think there's any place in the world where a woman can't venture alone," she once said. It had taken years for Ynés to find her purpose, to realize that she wanted to study the nature around her. But once she did, nothing could stop her, and Ynés Mexía would become the most accomplished female plant collector of her time. It just comes to show you, it is never too late to start over.
Welcome back! What did you think of today's adventure? We hope you learned something new. Be sure to share the story with your friends and family, and use what you've learned today to go out there and make a positive impact on history yourself. That's all for now, but if you want to learn more about important and amazing stories from the past, be sure to subscribe to Honest History Magazine, where you'll discover stories from around the world. Thanks for listening! This episode was written by Heidi Coburn, narrated by Natalia Lee, and produced by Robot Pirate Media. To learn more about Honest History, visit us at honesthistory.co and follow along for updates on social media.